Okay, so what I'm going to do is go over these 4 common cognitive traps that affect decision making. And I'm really going to ask you to think about what solutions are. And at the end of this segment, I'll give you an opportunity to type some in. Although if you think of some on the way, feel free to type them in. After that, I'm going to go over that 4-step process and talk about solutions. But before we get there, we'd love to hear what people are thinking. I know some of the people on here, I know you're very skilled at this. Okay, so one more poll question about the specific cognitive trap I'm going to talk about first, and I'll give you a hint. It is called narrow framing. So here's the question. How much money did Quaker lose in the 3 years after the company bought Snapple? If you think it's $5 million, it's A, $1 billion, B, $1.5 billion, C, or $100 million, D.
All right. Responses are coming in quickly. I'll give everybody about 5 more seconds to make a decision. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go to the results.
Okay, this is funny to me because 5 million got the most votes, and I don't know if that's because it's first. You know, when we make decisions about what to answer on a question, I think that might influence it. But the actual answer is 1.5 billion. It's 16.7% of you got that right. That is an enormous amount of money to lose. It's not spend, it's lose. And so one of the things that is a result of the narrow framing that they in fact used when they thought about it is, should we buy this, yes or no? They really didn't consider any other options about how to invest that money. And if you ask the question, how should we invest or how could we invest $1.5 billion, I think you could come up with a lot better ideas than actually just losing it. So while this question about buying a company or not might not be part of your daily work, we are all faced with decisions on a daily basis that we have this kind of narrow framing. So typically around hiring or firing, the questions are framed as, should I fire this person, yes or no? Should I hire this person, yes or no? And not really looking at some kinds of other options. So we're going to move on to our second cognitive trap. So this question is related to it, and I'll give you a hint. It's called confirmation bias. So if you're hiring someone and you think they're going to be a great fit, you check their references, you think you've done your research, is there anything else you do before making the offer? Sleep on it, yeah.
Okay, so feel free to write your response in the chat field. It's at the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Looks like we're getting a couple of responses right now. So Nicole is saying sleep on it. Do you agree that sleeping on anything when you're making a major decision is helpful? Does it help cloud your thoughts at all?
I think it is very helpful, and it definitely ties in with one of the solutions that we're going to get to at that section.
Okay. Let's see. Jen says research the person's online profile. So LinkedIn, definitely. Can you think of any other places to go to, Cassandra?
Well, you know, Facebook. Yeah. So it's interesting because if some of you may have been through this exact process where you've done this and you thought this was a good fit and the person started working and if it wasn't a good fit, it's really because of this confirmation bias, which means, and we're all victim to it, it's like just part of our brains. It's not like there's anything wrong. You know, it's just kind of how we are as humans, that we search out information to convince ourselves that we're right. And so even if you do references, even if you do those kinds of things, if your lens is only looking for things that confirm that you think it's a good decision, that's all you'll see. So this is really tricky to get over, but knowing about it is a really important thing because then you can put in place some things, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we're going to go to the next cognitive trap, number 3. This one is a poll. It's a little bit it's a two-part, so I'm just going to go through it, and then we can see what people think. Okay, so college students were given the following scenario. Would you rather have job A, a high-paying job that aligns with what they studied and is kind of what they think they should do, or job B, a non-traditional career that pays less but is more fulfilling? So when they were asked themselves which job they would choose, 66% said B. Now, then they were asked the second question, and here's what the poll is. They were asked, if this was your best friend, what job would you advise them to choose? So what do you think? What percent said that they would recommend their best friend choose job B? A, 50%, B, 100%, C, 83%, or D, 66%?
Okay. So we're going to go to the next slide where you can actually vote on the question. I see a lot of people putting their answers in the poll. So go ahead here. All right, I'll give you about 4 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's close the poll and look at the results.
Okay, so you guys got it right. The 37% said 83%, and that is exactly what happened. So I'm going to get, again, this gets back to kind of the issues that you were talking about. If you sleep on it, you get a little bit different perspective. And if you put yourself in you take yourself out of this question and put your best friend in the equation, you actually get a different answer than if you were thinking about yourself. So this is the short-term emotion that can get in the way, and this is cognitive trap 3. So later on, there's a quick question that you can ask to help you overcome this, which is great news, and I will get to that very soon. We're going to move on to the 4th cognitive trap, and there's a poll about that one. So again, it's overconfidence. I'll give you a little hint. So a study showed that when doctors reckoned that they were completely certain about a diagnosis, what percent of the time were they actually wrong? So again, they think they're completely certain about the diagnosis. So if you think it was A, they're wrong 10% of the time, B, 20% of the time, C, 30% of the time, or D, 40% of the time.
Okay, results are coming in. I'm going to close the poll in 3 seconds. 2, 1. All right, let's see the results.
Okay, you guys got a tie for the right answer. So the right answer is 40% of the time. That is pretty scary. I mean, this is doctors that said they were like 100% certain that they were right, and they were wrong 40% of the time. So again, we all fall victim to this overconfidence. I put the slide in with the skateboarder because I thought, we just think, yeah, we can do it. We're right. And it's really our brain playing tricks on us sometimes because we don't like to feel uncertain, or we don't like to feel that we don't know. Okay, so now is a chance for people to check in or contribute some ideas that you have about how to overcome these decision-making traps. And there were a couple people that answered earlier that I'll say are good ones, talking with people's colleagues, not just their listed references. And trying them out to see if they're a good fit is a great idea. That's why that temp to hire process is becoming so popular, because that does give people a chance to try out someone before making the commitment of a job offer.
Sure. And I think this is why so many people have mentors or people who serve on their executive team where they can run ideas past so they don't feel alone in the decision-making process. I think that really helps.
It does. And the group can fall victim to the same cognitive traps, or even that's not in and of itself just enough, because I've seen that where, it's like groupthink where people all think this person is the right hire and then the person isn't when they start. So it definitely can be a correction for an individual making a decision, but you have to look at the risks for the whole group.
Mm-hmm. I see a couple of other great responses. Shauna is saying collaborate with others. Jen says talk to people outside of your industry. And Sandra says have individuals meet many levels during the interview.
Yes. I'm listening to this book on tape that suggested when people go in for interviews, you collect information from the people that greet them and the security guard and the receptionist, because that's more likely to be their true self than what they're acting like in the interview.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay. So this process wrap, it's again from the Heath Brothers book. They love acronyms, so we'll go through these one by one, and these are all ways to overcome these cognitive traps. So widening your options, again, don't just consider one thing yes or no. teenagers are very often limit their decisions to this, yes or no, should I do this one thing, yes or no. And not surprisingly, organizations are also. So this is just something that you can really improve your odds of making a good decision by looking at more than one option. And then reality test your assumptions. So again, we talked about this a little bit with like the temp to hire idea, but really to run small experiments. So there's a story in the book about a company that wanted to hire a firm to do something large. But instead of just giving it all or nothing to one firm, they chunked out the very first step, and they hired 5 different firms to do that first step. This gave them a ton of good ideas, as well as showing who they really wanted to work for the rest of them. So really just trying to make the decision, not this all eggs are all in one basket, all or nothing decision. Okay, the next step, attain distance before deciding. So this could happen with a good night's sleep or some of the other things that people have suggested, but I'll tell you the magic question. So if you have been agonizing over something personally, and you know sometimes it goes on for months, the way to quickly get yourself out of that is to just imagine if it was your best friend. What would you tell your best friend? And sometimes that answer is immediate. Sometimes it's not immediate, but pretty soon. And if it's a work question, again, sometimes people know what they need to do in their job, but they have emotional attachments to what was being done that hinder them. So that version of the question is, what would you tell your successor? And then it becomes very clear what to do. And then the fourth one, prepare to be wrong. Again, we don't like being wrong, so we want to just pretend that we're not going to be wrong and that we can read the future. But there's a great example about this, that you can set up these tripwires so that you don't have to worry. And there's a story in the book, and I remember hearing these rumors when I was younger. So there was a band that had a very complicated kind of electric setup for their concerts, and they had a big contract with an enormous amount of detail about how things needed to be set up. And they stuck right in the middle of it a thing about having a bowl of M&Ms out with no brown M&Ms. So if they got to a venue and they saw this bowl of M&Ms, and if it had brown M&Ms in it, they knew that they hadn't really read the contract carefully, and they knew that they needed to really go through all the setup to make sure that it was going to be safe. So again, instead of just assuming, well, they signed the contract, everything is going to be right, they put in place this little tripwire to see.
That's a great story, Cassandra. I'd like to ask everybody if you can guess which band that is. I know we don't have anything to give away, but you get bragging rights on the concert.
Yeah, if you're old enough, you'll remember.
Here you go, Shauna. Yep, you're correct. It was Van Halen. Very good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so this question, when is intuition accurate, is an important one, because a lot of times people will say, well, I'm making this decision on my intuition, or I'm making it on my gut. When is this something that is actually reliable? It's in cases that there's been a lot of repetition and feedback. So there's research about 10,000 hours is the amount that you need to be a true master at something. And it needs to be in what is called a kind environment, where the cause and effect is incredibly clear. So like a golf expert or a baseball expert, when they've had this level of mastery, they can look at somebody who's starting their swing and know exactly what's going to happen before they even hit the ball. So if you have 10,000 hours in something that is that cause and effect, that clearly cause and effect, you can pretty much rely on that. But if your experience and feedback is in what's called a wicked environment, where there's just so many variables, then it's not really going to be something that you can rely on. And I think this is really tricky for people, because they think that they've done things a lot, they have these skills, and therefore that means that the feeling that they're getting is, in fact, based on this knowing, but it actually might not be. It might be like a feeling of something else. You know, like in hiring, it's often people that are similar to you. You feel good about them. So again, to just look at, you know, what is that information? What's the source of the information that if you're feeling like something is a good idea or not? So we have one more poll. So capping up this whole discussion according to researchers, which is most important in producing decisions that increase revenues, profits, and market share, basically that are good, that have a good outcome. These words might not be exactly the kinds of decisions that you're making every day, but good decisions that are documented by research. So they did, this comes from research about decisions and the effects, the outcomes of them. So which do you think? Is it process or analysis?
Okay. Looks like everyone's putting their votes in now. I'll give you about 3 more seconds. 2, 1. Okay, let's close the poll and look at the results.
Okay, so again, the group's right. 56% said process, and that is the answer by a factor of 6. Not that analysis isn't necessary. It's often part of a good process, but analysis on its own is not enough to lead to a good decision. So just because we understand our shortcomings, it's not enough to fix them. Like if we know we're nearsighted but we don't have glasses, we still can't see. So that's really what the importance of this kind of RAP process is, that putting in place a process that will, get you a much higher likelihood of a good outcome. So there are many tools to help decision making, and you're going to get emailed one, you're going to get a blank copy and then a handout about it. And it's a simple decision making matrix that is very helpful for groups. So if you have a group that's making decisions, it's often not clear who's making it or who's informing it. So this can be helpful by first identifying the decisions that are being made and then choosing the ones that are important to clarify the roles in relationship to the decision. And then you can actually identify the individuals or group teams in each of the decisions, and then who's responsible, who gets to approve or veto, who needs to put input in because they have critical information, who needs just to be informed afterwards or needs to be informed when it's time to support it. So this is a very quick summary of this tool, and if you look at it and you have questions, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But we've been using this with a lot of groups, this RAP process and this decision-making matrix. This topic of decision-making and shared decision-making, it comes up almost every group that we work with. So I have 2 quotes to end this portion. This one, I'll read it. Sometimes the hardest part of making a good decision is knowing there's one to be made. And research shows that teachers make 600 to 1,000 decisions a day, which is enormous. And so while we may not make that many, we are making a lot more than we realize. And I just found this other quote this morning I thought would be perfect. So I'm going to read it. It's from Peter Drucker. The only thing we know about the future is that it will be different. Trying to predict the future is like trying to drive down a country road at night with no lights while looking out the back window. The best way to predict the future is to create it. And so when I read that, I thought that is a really good visual for taking a look at what decisions are being made in your organization. And it really goes against, I think, what people want to believe. People want to believe that they know things from their experience, which they do, but that it's enough to make good decisions without a process. And I just love that visual, so thought I would end there.